Welcome back to Cinema Pursuit. Today we have another returning guest, Marley from the Real Lovers podcast. Last time we were talking about Familia. This time we're talking about Apes. So, different family, but same family. What's up, Marley?
Koba.
Koba. Wika. Caesar. No, we'll get into dialogues.
Yeah,
later.
we'll get into it. Thanks for having me back, Vakash. I love your podcast and just I love talking to you about movies. And I'm glad that we're talking about an actual film other than like I love Tokyo
We're
Drift.
talking about a film, not a movie today. Even
Yeah.
though, like, me and Zach sparse that conversation sometimes, and I'm like, we never give any explanation because we're talking about Jaws, and Jaws is a movie. It's not a film, but technically it is a film, and it's like it's whatever. We're not being pretentious about that ever. Like, it is what it is. Call them films, call them movies, call them whatever. As long as you respect them and watch them, what more do you need?
As long as you put them in your life, that's
exactly.
That's what's most important. So,
But yeah, today we're doing Dawn for the Planet of the Apes on a 10-year anniversary. We probably should have done this like 8 months ago when Kingdom for the Planet of the Apes came out, but that doesn't matter because the apes are timeless. Marley, why this movie?
This movie it's my favorite in the Planet of the Apes trilogy, and like this new trilogy. And I remember watching this in theaters and just being completely like amazed with it. I got out of my theater job at that time, so I was I still had some friends, and I was able to get some free passes to go into this movie. And I immediately left this theater and was like, I gotta pay money for this, just because like this is straight cinema. This is straight cinema. This is why I go to the movies, and it's incredible. I love it so much.
So did you know who Matt Reeves was? Did you watch Let Me In or Cloverfield or anything? Did you know what you were getting into, or was it just like the sequel to the Rise for the Planet of the Apes?
Like, I knew who Matt Reeves was. Like, I've seen Cloverfield, and I don't think I saw the Let the Right One In remake. A lot of people say that's the lesser movie.
It is lesser, but it's still good.
Yeah, it's doing its own thing. It's doing its own thing. But I was just kind of going in because I really like Rise. I think a lot of people get a lot of hate, like give that movie a lot of hate, but it sets up
it's a good movie.
It sets up a lot of stuff for that movie. So I was kind of going off of that, and then I was like, "Oh, Matt Reeves, I know that name a little bit." And then this movie like completely blew me away in every aspect.
Because for me, I didn't know who he was. I had seen Cloverfield because like I probably saw it at my cousin's house or something. They had put it on, and I'm not really too big on found footage, but I've seen Blair Witch, that, a couple other things, but I didn't know who he was. I had seen Rise, and this was the summer I graduated from high school, and within less than a month, I was already in college. I was taking summer classes like psychology, whatever. But I didn't have time to go see any movies because I was in class every day. And Zach was like, "Hey, make sure you see Dawn for the Planet of the Apes. I think that's so your thing. Like, just go see it." I wasn't able to see it. Came out, and then I was like, "Oh, I got the copy of Dawn for the Planet of the Apes. Let me plug it in and see what's going on." I was at my computer. I was just watching this copy of the movie, and I didn't stop watching the movie. And it's the only time this has happened where I would never sit at my computer like this. I would never sit at a computer at a desk and watch a movie for the first time. It's the first and only time I've done it, because the first, not even 5 minutes, the first minute of this movie was so captivating to me that I could not stop watching. I was like, the shot comes out from Caesar's eyes, and I was invested, and it just keeps going and keeps going. And I'm like, it's like, whatever, 11, I should have, why am I watching this movie? I was watching on the big screen, but no, I just have to keep watching this movie. And there was just something about this movie that changed something inside of me. And I've got some good memories, core memories about what this movie is itself, and then the effect it's had on me just as a person, which is, it's a weird movie to say it happened with, but it happened with this movie. And it probably is because it speaks to a lot of like sensibilities I have as reader, writer, person who takes an art. That's all it is. Marley, do you have a ranking for the Planet of the Apes movies? I don't know if you've seen the old ones or just the new ones. What's your ranking of the ones you've seen?
The funny thing is, I haven't really seen any of the old ones. I'm not really a big fan of Tim Burton, so I don't
You don't need to
really.
see that one. Besides Paul Giamatti, fire. Rest of it, yeah.
So I'm really just gonna rank like this new trilogy. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is definitely like my number one spot, and then I'll go Rise, and then War will get like if you decide to cover War like on on your podcast like later, I feel like War kind of like dives deep into like the same themes that Dawn did, just not as well in my opinion. Like probably one of the main things why I love Dawn of the Planet of the Apes so much is just like it's constant themes about how that guns are bad and violence. When you put guns pretty much in anyone's hand, it will always cause problems. And I love kind of like that constant, just like what Matt Reeves just kind of like shrugs the audience like we need like guns are dangerous weapons. They're dangerous weapons. They cause like so much unrest. And I love like that a major blockbuster, a major summer blockbuster was able to have the balls and come out and say that. And also the way, like you mentioned, like the way this movie even starts. It starts with like a shot of like just Caesar's eyes as it pans out.
Yeah.
Most of like the first like 10 minutes of this movie is like silence and just like the apes signing back and forth. To have like a summer blockbuster movie do that, like that's just, this movie has so much balls to just
He
do that.
had the studio didn't give him any notes on that. They're
Hmm.
like, yeah, we're good with this. He didn't want to do this movie. He talks about it a lot. Like I've heard him talk about a lot of movies now, and he's like, I try to find every single reason possible not to do a project. Batman,
Hmm.
same thing. At some point he left the project, and like there's like a little bit of a if and like he wanted final cut, and he was just trying to figure out the whole situation with Warner Brothers, and he's like, I'm trying to find my way out, and they told me yes to every single thing I wanted to do. And I'll talk about the influence of that in a minute, but you're talking about guns and things like that about this movie, so I'm going to cut to the Q&A podcast. Jeff Goldsmith, it's a writer's podcast, very
Hmm.
much a la Craig
Kind of like,
Mazin's podcast Script Notes, kind of like that, except Craig Mazin's actually, those guys are writers, so a
hmm
little bit different, but this is one of my favorite podcasts.
hmm
But let's listen to Matt Reeves.
okay.
Do, but they don't. So the question was regards to getting away from the atomic age of the 60s Apes films. Here there is an anti-gun sentimentality. And what did the studio think of it?
The studio wasn't really at all, they didn't have any negative reactions to what that aspect of the story was. And I think the thing that we were trying to do, what I thought was, since it was going to be like a classic mythic Western, the idea was once you realize there are these two populations and you know it's not going to work out, then the question not becomes what happens, but how does it happen? So it means that the movie is an anatomy of violence. And given that the movie is a Planet of the Apes movie, and the idea is that the metaphor is that we are apes, we are animals, and we're looking at ourselves by looking into the face of the apes, the idea is why can't we resist violence? And so the gun was one particular aspect of violence as it was represented. So it wasn't even necessarily meant to be presented as like a question of like gun control or something. It was much more the idea of that representing the notion of violence, and that Caesar himself would see this as really a tool for violence and would want to keep it out of the ape's hands and to keep it out of his world. And so all of those things do have parallels, but we were trying to, and we were aware of them, but we were trying to make the movie very much about human nature and what it is.
But that's what he says about gun control itself. I highly recommend you listen to it later, but
Hmm.
it's interesting that the anatomy of violence, about what's going on with the apes versus the humans and why this situation doesn't work. This is a situation we see with humanity
Hmm.
constantly. I'm not naming names today. This ain't the place for it.
Yeah.
But you look around the world and there's so many situations out there where there are people just constantly fighting, and you can't say that one side has done something wrong and one side hasn't done something wrong, because both sides have done something wrong, because it's a cycle of violence, right? Why does it happen?
Hmm.
Why does it keep happening? And there's something about that that's always compelling, right? I mean,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that? If you have any
No,
thoughts, I can go into
no,
it.
no, I love it, and I love like kind of staying on like this opening sequence because I love it when movies like are so concise. Like when they're setting up like a movie, like when you get like the first like gunshot, and then it's like the gunshot heard around the world, and Caesar has like that moment where everyone's kind of freaking out, and like the humans are freaking out because they're scared. And Caesar just looks at them and just shouts, "Go!" like yells "Go" at them, and that's almost like that's Caesar saying like, please leave, like please leave our land, because I know something bad is going to happen. So if we just let
Yeah.
everything just kind of stop right here and just kind of forget everything, then that's when like the movie would end. Like that'd be the shortest movie ever. But obviously, like things lead to other things, and yeah.
But
So
that's the cycle, isn't it? That they have, this is the dawn of the Planet of the Apes, right? It becomes the Planet of the Apes at the end of the movie because they're fighting for it now. And it was that this movie is the last chance we have for coexistence. Matt
Mhm.
Reeves calls it literally the planet of the humans and the apes, and it doesn't happen. And why could that not happen? What is the chaos within the life cycles that we have as humans that leads to violence? What is that? And Caesar spends a lot of the movie being like, we as apes, we're not humans. We are better than them. We are not them. And the thing is, I mean, yeah, it's sci-fi, and the whole point is to say that fundamentally, if you have free will, that's what it means to be a human being, right? And you can apply
Mhm.
that. We were talking about Blade Runner. You could apply it to that. And do those robots actually have free will, or do they have programming and things? There's so much to get into with that conversation. But here it's like, there's no conversation to be had. These apes are humans. They're pretty much humans, are they not? And
Mhm.
one of the guys on the group that goes to the dam to help, he's like, they don't need anything. They don't need electricity. They don't need all these luxuries that we need. They can
Mhm.
survive. And he, through like throwaway dialogue, we count it as throwaway, but it's not throwaway, right? Reeves has a point. It's like, they are superior in survival. And we've been degraded to a point where we are surviving now. And I think, when's the last time you watched it? Did you watch this pre-COVID or post-COVID? Like the last time you watched this?
See, I'm really glad that you brought this up, because I watched this pre-COVID, like when it came out in theaters, and then I rewatched it like for this podcast. I rewatched it twice this year, and
Yeah,
rewatching this after COVID,
that
especially
beginning.
that beginning, like it hits different. It hits different. Talking about like it's the simian flu, right?
And
The
Furiosa and Mad Max Fury Road. If you haven't seen Furiosa or Mad Max Fury Road, go watch them. But
Mhm.
in Furiosa, the opening little like, it's the gasoline, and you hear these voices coming out of your ears, and one of those voices talking about a virus, and it's talking
Mhm.
about that, and you can see that obviously Miller has seen the effect it's had in the zeitgeist and put it in there, because it is the damage is irreparable to what it's done to humans. And we're not going to get into it, but it sets the tone for this movie so well
Mhm.
that it's somber. It's not even, it's so horrifying because you know what it is, and it could get worse, and this is it getting worse now. I mean, if people haven't seen Contagion and stuff like that, like, this is
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
bad.
See, I do love that sequence, but the one problem that I do have with it, it's not really a problem, but it's definitely a choice that Matt Reeves chooses to use, is like when he puts the Obama speech like in there. It that specifically grounds this movie in in a very specific time, like
Yeah.
when Reeves wants this movie to take place. And I feel like if he didn't include like a specific president, but still had like the same stuff that Obama was saying like in
Yeah.
that clip, I feel like it would have made this movie a little bit more timeless. But now that I know like, oh,
But
this came out like 2012, 2013, that then it's set in that right around that time. I'm like, that's where I kind of have a little bit of issues with it. Not big issues,
But
but it's just
I think it's a good thing. I'd argue
Mhm.
otherwise, that the fact that they used that clip specifically means that it's set during that time. So now
Mhm.
the Dawn for the Planet of the Apes is a period movie. It's a contemporary
Mhm.
movie for us, but in 10, 20, 50 years, when people watch it again, it'll be a reflection of our times. And that
Mhm.
is something rare that we come along. Like, I don't want people to remember us by just Marvel movies. I want them to remember us by this movie. Even though 2014, you have Captain America 2, Guardians of the Galaxy, peak era MCU.
Yeah. This was such this year when Dawn of the Planet of the Apes came out. That was like such a great year for. I know that's like common online.
No, but 2014 is a peak year. You have Chef, Birdman, even though Birdman's a little down on the list, but like it was the year I graduated high school, so it's like unforgettable year of movies for me. I think the point that he makes though is that the actions that we make affect our lives. They affect other people's lives, and if we don't understand the perspective of it, the violence is just going to keep going because somebody has to stop, and then the other person has to stop too. And he shows that the comparison really is that Jason Clarke's character and Caesar versus Carver and Dreyfus and Koba, that those are the two camps of people of we're trying to be civil and trying to figure this out without violence, and the other ones are like, we got to get ready before they get us, and look, they're getting ready. And it's like you see the skirmish of just being fearful and everything else in between that starts violence before it needs to start. But that being said, look at what happened to everybody on both sides who had the violence happen to them. Dreyfus lost his family. Everybody, like they don't talk about what happened after the simian flu happened, right? But there's probably some bad things, terrible things that happened. And Koba, at the hands of the humans, human work, there's so much that happened to him. And that's why he's such a great villain, which we'll get into afterwards. But I do want to talk about, he talks about anatomy of violence, but I also want to talk about the anatomy of goodness, because for every single bad thing that we see in the movie, you have moments like Alex, the kid that's with them, like his son, and Maurice is like waiting outside his tent.
Maurice is MVP. Maurice is the MVP of this entire series. I stand with Maurice.
Is sitting there with Alex. Yeah, like Maurice sitting there reading the graphic novel with him is one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
And that's like that scene's beautiful too, because it shows like the power of art. Bless you. It shows the power of art and how it could bring us together, like during times of unrest and uncertainty. And like I know you want to get like out of like anatomy of violence, but one more thing I wanted to add is that violence is put forward by fear.
100%.
Like the fear and what you and how that fear is kind of like pushed into everyone's consciousness by things that they cannot see. The beginning sequence, like when the human shoots the ape for the first time, he just made a prejudgment. He's just like, I should be afraid of apes because of everything that's happened before. But he doesn't know these apes could be different. He just makes a quick judgment because it's like
no,
this is.
But hold on. Did they never mention having a fight or any sort of skirmish with an ape? It's just purely off of hating the apes. That was hatred motivated. That he attacked. He shot Ash. Why? Because of the fear of what the simian flu did. And Keri Russell's character, she brings it up as like, it's not their fault that this happened. We're the ones who created this virus in a lab. It's us, which is so crazy to hear because people are like, Wuhan, this and that. And, oh, man, we're not even going to get into that. But you know what I'm talking about. Like, it rings.
We're not going to get into it, but we will. So that's what makes this movie so relatable now, because of everything with the Wuhan virus and all the Asian hate that was going on, like during COVID and after COVID. It's just it's wild. So
do you actually listen to this? Do you know the ethnicity of Matt Reeves' wife?
No, what's her?
I wouldn't know this either, but she is Asian. And the beginning of the Batman, what happens?
Refresh. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
So, I got you. So at the beginning of the Batman, they are trying to beat up a man, an Asian man specifically. And Batman comes out of nowhere and he beats down every single one of those dudes in a hard way. And it's awesome. But that was very much because of the Asian hate stuff, that the Asian violence stuff that was going on. It still goes on. And it's crazy what happens in the world. But
So Matt Reeves is Batman, essentially. He
yeah.
made himself
Oh yeah.
Batman in a
Yes,
Batman
yes, he
movie.
is.
I love that
Yeah,
so
but
much.
that's the thing. That's what you do with your writing. That's the whole point. It's like, why would you not put that in your perspective? You know, I would do that myself too.
For sure. But yeah, I just wanted to get that across about how fear and hatred is the one thing that kind of like pushes us across that line. So
And it's fear, hatred, and division. That's all it
mhm,
is. Every single problem could be fixed if you talk to people. Number one, if you talk to people, you communicated properly, you understood them, and then if you use your words instead of using any other tool that you got to, do violence, because there's ways to solve things, but it's like, are people willing to do them? That's half the fight, or that's more than half the fight, honestly.
that's knowing is half the battle.
Yeah.
Different movie,
Do
but
you know where this movie started, though? Coming on the no. But do you know where Matt Reeves really got the idea of like the beginning of this movie, though?
where to get where to get it started?
So he had just had his son at this era, and his
Mhm,
son was getting to the point where he's starting to speak, and he could see how his son was trying to communicate with him, but his son didn't know how to speak yet. So he sees this fiery emotion from him and how he's trying to use his hands and this and that. And you watch the movie and it's like, oh, emotionally, the first 15, 20 minutes, very much all the scenes that we have throughout the time with the apes are that. There's such a
mhm,
drama to it. And it started just because that's his way in. Every time he's got to find something emotionally that connects him. And that relationship he had with his son was what he was trying to put into this movie. And that's where they started for him. Like, he's like,
mhm,
I want to do this. Y'all are starting in San Francisco. No, I want to start in the forest. Let's go to the forest. I want to be with the apes. I want to see what they've done. I want to see all
mhm,
the infrastructure they have. I want to do that. That is what's compelling. This is the dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This is not the dawn of the humans, right? So
mhm.
he fundamentally changed where this movie was headed emotionally, because that's how he works. And like the Q&A pod I was just talking about, reason why this movie is so important to me. 2014, I was driving somewhere and I was listening to this pod. I remember where I stopped for gas. I remember this pod so much because this conversation made me realize so much about me. And I spent so many years of my life thinking that emotionality is wrong. Like, you should be distant and cold, like a Fincher vibe, just
Mhm.
as a life, that like being emotionless is a merit. And I spend every single day of my life now thinking otherwise, that the more emotional you are, you should be, you should be calm in your moments, but you should never not listen to your emotions in the sense that you need to follow a story somewhere. You need to follow people somewhere. You need to understand where they're coming from. And it's an empathy thing. If you don't, like Matt Reeves talks about it in this, that you go to the movies. Why do you go to the movies? Because for 2 hours, 3 hours, you're trying to practice empathy for that much time. And that's what that is.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be here talking about movies today if it wasn't for listening to 90 minutes of Matt Reeves talking randomly. Didn't know the man, but now it was like, I like, he's just one of the coolest dudes I've ever heard talk about movies, because he's very much like me. He's a bit like high strung at times, and he's got to work out his feelings somehow. So I love it,
And
man.
and just listening to that clip that you played for us, it just seems like he just loves like the craft, and not only just the craft, but also loves movies. Like he wanted to make
100%.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes just because that's a movie that he would want to go see. And you got to put, like, there's so much respect that I have for filmmakers that want to make movies that they will see themselves, not just kind of like falling in line with like an MCU and just like collecting a paycheck. And
This
like
might be a little bit of a hot take, but Matt Reeves is up there with Nolan, Denis, Greta Gerwig. Like, he's one of the best blockbuster filmmakers we have right now. And the only discount he has to that is that he's only made 3 movies in that era, like, just because it
Mhm.
takes him a bit longer to put out the movies. That's all it is. Besides that, pound for pound, emotionally, he hits so well for me.
Hell,
But you know why that is, though? Oh, go
I'll
ahead,
even
go
say
ahead.
I'll even say even hotter take. I'll say that Matt Reeves is better than Nolan or Denny. How about that for your listeners? I'm just kidding.
That's hot. No.
Let's go.
I understand. I didn't say no, did I? I didn't say let's get off. I understand because
Yeah.
that's the feeling I get from him too. Like, I think he's getting to that point. It's just he hasn't been there yet. I think his filmography, when he gets all said and done, it'll reflect that. Nolan, at this point, he's just top dollar. Everybody wants that man. That's all it is. It's like, I'll pay, like, you know, the meme from Futurama, like, here's my money, you know, like, take my money. That's what it is. Did you ever like Shakespeare, that sort of thing, like plays? Did you ever get into that, whether it's college or high school, anything like that?
I got more into like Shakespeare, like plays, like in college. I wouldn't necessarily that I appreciated it, but I never really knew how to understand that. But I'm glad that you brought this up because Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is like it's full on Shakespeare. In a way, it's almost kind of like Hamlet. In a way, like this movie becomes
It
Hamlet
is.
because it's very much like The Lion King, especially with the whole
Have you
Koba
seen
plot.
Have you seen
Plot
Antigone?
line.
Or not? Excuse me, have you read Antigone, or like Greek
No.
tragedies or anything like that? So
Mhm.
the Shakespearean tragedies, the Greek tragedy, Antigone's from Sophocles, you know, very older stuff. But these tragedies, even though like growing up, I'd read them and I'd be like, I don't know what this is. This is boring. Why do we need to do this in class? And then you sit there and you think about it. I did some like I used to be in a theater class. So like we did Shakespeare, and that was a whole experience in and of itself. But I learned that I like these relationships because you're talking about Lion King, you're talking about this, talk about Black Panther. There's a lot of movies that bring these sorts of characters and these sorts of dynamics, and they pull them off within their different worlds. And this, like you said, Koba and Caesar, this is for the books. This is one of the best ones ever done.
Mm-hmm. It's not only one of the best ones ever done, but just at least the best one kind of like put to screen. And what I love most about Koba
Yeah.
is it's you know the struggle that he went through. Like if you've seen Rise, even if you haven't seen Rise, you see like the scars like on Koba. You see
It's
it in
Toby
his
Kebbel's
face.
acting, man. He's like, human work, human work. And it's like, that's the thing about good acting. You don't have to see the other movie if they act it well, right?
And,
You don't have to. He sells it. That's it.
and but this is the thing, and I'm sure we'll get into this like later in the podcast when we start talking about like the Oscars. It boggles my mind that this film wasn't
Mocap.
awarded. Mocap is acting. Mocap is acting. That's all I have to
We'll
say.
talk about it. We about to
Because
cook on that.
it's wild to me. I remember sitting. I know I'm always disappointed with the Academy every single year, but I feel like the year that this film was nominated for like best visual effects, and nothing for like Andy Serkis or any of the other like mocap
We gonna
performers.
talk about it because
Yeah.
it's a travesty. But let me
it's
put
so
the
sad.
nail in Caesar, in not Caesar, in Shakespeare's coffin real quick.
Yeah.
Because the thing, why is Shakespeare, why are these Greek tragedies actually relatable, is that it's all about people and their situations, whether
Mhm.
they trust somebody, the traumas they got, past actions, whether they're bad actions, good actions, whatever happens, how that trauma builds up, and how these things kind of, there's dominoes falling down that end in
Mhm.
tragedy. And we know what the tragedy is, and how we get to that tragedy is fantastic. And like you said, or actually what's funny is the writers for this, not the one that came in after Reeves came, but Jaffa and Silver, the ones that wrote Rise also. I remember being on Reddit and having a conversation with their son at some point after Dawn for the Planet of the Apes came out. Just randomly. He was like, yeah, those are my parents. Like, yeah, they're awesome. Like, they're great writers and this and that. Like, I don't know. Like, I just remember that it's been like 10 years since that happened.
That's crazy. If they're listening to this podcast, just say hello.
Oh, I'll send it. I'll put it on the subreddit for Planet of the Apes or something. So,
Yeah.
and I'll tag it. I'll tell them. But
Mhm.
these movies, the writing matters. And I mean, obviously writing always matters, but there's a beauty to this where it's like, you don't have to have, like you said, the story is so simple, but it's the way that it's told, the way everything happens. It gets, you know what it is? You know the shot of Caesar, or not, excuse me, not Caesar, but Koba and Blue Eyes standing in the village when it's on fire and they like touch heads?
Mm-hmm.
You have to get to that moment. You have to sell that moment. How do you get to that? How do you get to that sort of betrayal and all these little dramatic things that are happening and sell that moment? And you know what's happening because it's like genuine emotion. There's fire everywhere. And you're like, this man, like you get mad, right? There's like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this to Caesar's son? But
No,
I'm getting into the juice. I'll get it. We can get into the juice if you're good.
no,
you got
well, we can get into the action is the action is the juice, but like just commenting on that one thing, it's like you're mad at Koba like when that happens, but going back to to the performance, you understand his frustration, you understand why he's at this level, and I feel like really the only time where I wasn't like on his side it's in the third act. It's the scene where he kills one of his own, and it's
we'll get into it because
yeah,
my
we'll
whole
get into it.
my soapbox is about Koba actually, and you'll see why.
Okay.
But that being said, let's get into action is the juice. The juice is always the juice. Action is always the juice. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, all juice. There's very much a lot of stints of this movie that I want to talk about, but what are your pieces for action is the juice? Best scenes of this movie?
I think one of my favorite scenes. I had to mention this one, but it's the battle sequence, and I love oneers. I love
Yeah,
what one takes in movies. It's probably one of my favorites. It's CGI, but the camera is like anchored like
it's
on
the
a
tank
tank.
shot.
It's the tank, yeah, the tank shot,
Yeah,
and basically it's just the camera going around. It's anchored like on the tank, and you're just seeing all this violence being presented, and it's such an amazing shot too because it's a one take, and but also you're seeing like all the destruction happening all at once while also seeing Koba like entering the tank. You're not losing any action, but like that's probably one of my favorite action like scenes. But kind of leading up to that, before like that's throwing gasoline on the fire is when Koba kills like the human, because just like going back like to the like the mocap and like the acting, I love how Koba just kind of walks into that scene where he's just kind of like joking around and playing with them, and then has like
you're
a
talking
gun in
about
his
the two
hand, and
humans he kills for taking the guns when he takes the guns.
yeah, when he takes the guns,
Yeah,
just because, and that's when Koba realized like I have this power, and I like and I know what I'm going to do with it. So
he's
it's
smarter. I think he's smart in that. You
mhm,
give him, you're not giving him enough credit. I think Koba is just as smart as Caesar. He might be even better at Caesar at different things, and that's why Koba was a brother. He's not someone else. He's a brother to him. And the scene you're talking about with the tank shot on the rotating rotor of the tank, that
mhm,
shot is, so they shot, I think that was on a set in New Orleans at like a abandoned Six Flags park, and they shot that plate, and then they spent how much ever time in post getting that shot together. So they would record every single little piece of like, oh, there's a ape burning, there's all these little elements of like motion capture that they had to put in there, a guy getting dragged away, all that sort of stuff has to be done. They pulled all that stuff in there. It is crazy how long it takes to make these shots. And Matt Reeves in the pod, he's talking about how we have to go back and do revisions for a shot. Some of these shots, it'll get up to 200 revisions, 400 revisions, like, because we
mhm.
go back, I'll tell them, oh, this doesn't look good, this looks real enough, this is not that looks good. And it's just the whole process of what you want as a VFX artist, that you want to have input as to how this looks good, how does this emotionally work. And 200, 400 revisions. This shot took I think he said 1,020 or 1,030 revisions, and this shot was ready the week before they premiered the movie. That's how long it took to make that shot.
That's
And that's
wild.
one shot that goes on for maybe like a minute max. But it's
Mhm,
like, if you care about your movie, you're gonna do that work. And
mhm,
even, Roger Deakins even talks about his struggle with some VFX artists about getting the lighting right. And I'm
mhm.
sure Like a director who actually cares will convey their message as to how I want this. And you look at that shot, and by the time we get to that point of the movie, it's just a whirlwind of violence, and you're seeing what has gone on because the actions of one individual, the hate of one individual, and it's fantastic. What else? You have anything else for Action of the Juice?
Well, I mentioned like Koba taking the gun from like the
Yeah,
humans because that's what starts
and
everything.
and
Like
that's the
literally.
thing. He's a genius. Like I'm telling you, he's a genius.
Hmm.
And
And
that
it,
scene
but
is the most horrifying scene of this movie.
it's
Honestly.
it's it's horrifying because you see what he's doing.
Yeah.
You see like his whole plan, and I like that he's kind of like who's the mocap like artist like mocap
Toby
actor.
Kebbel.
Toby Kebbel, just the way he plays it and how he plays it kind of like joyfully and just kind of like, oh, I know what I'm gonna do here. Almost a little bit Joker vibes, like in a way.
I'll
Uh,
talk. Actually, this is a perfect time to bring it up. So, do you know how they learn all the stuff for being apes?
like I know that they used shoot like free runners and like professional wrestlers as well to kind of like get like to get like
The running.
uh the running and
Yeah.
also just like the stances. Like I believe like on the behind the scenes on the Blu-ray, Matt Reeves talked about how how he wanted like the mocap actors to understand breathing
Yeah.
because the apes in like this certain in the certain state like they're calm, like and like humans like when they're scared they're frantic, and it reflects kind of like it reflects so much like in this movie just because like this not trying to jump ahead but like the score also reflects that as well. You see you
Oh,
like
yeah.
when the apes are on screen you kind of have like this calm and serene kind of like moment like when you're a Caesar. Obviously it kind of jumps up a little bit like with when Koba's like on screen, but I love it. I love kind of like that take.
And the way that they like actually get the movement together, and
Mhm.
you'll like this detail, is Rocket, the character Rocket, like Ash's dad.
Yeah.
He is the guy who did it. His name is
Mhm.
Terry Notary, Terry Notary. Like,
Mhm.
I recommend anybody go look up his IMDb because he's the one who creates all that motion and gets them into boot camp of how they do that stuff. And
Mhm.
I was watching The Village, and he has credit on The Village as a movement coach. He's done everything from the Planet of the Apes movies. He did the Grinch. He's done Avatar, the Avenger movies, obviously this. He did The Hobbit, like Desolation of Smaug. I assume he's the one telling Benedict Cumberbatch how to do mocap for a freaking for a dragon. But it's
Yeah.
like he is that guy. And the one I'm waiting to tell you is Nope. He is the ape in Nope from the show that goes crazy. That's him playing it.
Oh, that's wild.
I bet you love that, didn't you?
Yeah,
I
that's
gotta
great.
leave those in there for you because that's the thing. It's like you never realize who's working behind a movie. It's like, oh, I love every single thing this person's made. You know, that sort of vibe, and it's awesome to see people who are that good at what they do. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, Andy Serkis brings it alive, but somebody's got to be there in in the thing, in the whole process, helping
With
him
the
bring it
dots.
alive with everybody. But it's
Mhm.
MVP the dots,
Yeah.
the
Or
motion
the
camera.
green suit. The green suit or whatever. I don't think it's not even a green suit anymore. I was kind of like impressed with watching the behind the scenes. It's like it's not necessarily it's they're just like wearing just like I want to say like half of like a ghillie suit or something like that. Like a
Yeah.
ghillie suit without the ghillie. So that
Mark
doesn't make
Ruffalo
sense.
calls it the man canceling suit for
Yeah,
him
yeah.
for doing all the Hulk stuff. He's just like, I don't feel like a human doing this. But it's like there's a beauty, or I'm not sure about him, but the beauty that Josh Brolin brings to Thanos. You talk about Caesar, you talk about Maurice, you talk about Toby Kebbel. I haven't seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, whoops, but it's like there's so much compelling work there. So I love it.
Mhm.
But let me
The
run it.
strength
We're going to
mocap
talk about
artists.
motion. We're going to get into it
Mhm.
in a minute. But
Mhm.
Action is the Juice for me is the first. It's the opening. It really is all the time that we spend with the apes, and there's such a beauty to it that you as like the opening 15 minutes where besides, Carver shooting the ape, we get to live with the apes. We get to see conversations with the apes. We get to think of the apes as, just they're real to me. Like you can't tell me these apes are fake. I'm invested within this story. And yeah, sure, they had, guys in suits and that worked also before, but this is a different level of work that they're doing. And you can just feel the tone of everything going on. It's like you feel that we're an inch away from war now, and they're having these conversations where it's like chaos is like at the door, and it's like if we invite it in, there's a lot of violence that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But it's so good. Oh, I gotta give credit to Jason Clarke real quick, because the moment, like, I think he's a fantastic actor. Like, every time I see him since like before Zero Dark 30, I've been a fan of his. And in this, there's a moment between like when they go back to base, and he's like, I gotta go up there. We gotta get the dam going, and he opens his drawer, and you see the gun with the bullets, and you see that even he's contemplating taking the gun, and then his wife comes in and he shelves it, because those are the moments where it's like, yeah, there's dialogue going on, but what's the actual emotion of this scene is that, there's a tension going on, and you might not think about it, but subconsciously he's telling you so much without telling you a single thing.
I love that so much. And also just like kind of going back to like that opening sequence, like with where the human shoots like the ape. Like I believe I mentioned it like earlier. The apes forgive in a way. Like they forgive like in their own way, because they're like it's like what I said. It's like when Caesar says go, and we'll forgive you. The interesting thing, like when Koba shoots, like takes like the guns of the humans and shoots them, the humans don't
Slaughters
forgive.
them.
But the humans don't forgive.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's a very interesting, like, kind of like
Dynamic.
comparison and
Yeah.
dynamic. Yeah, just because I don't know. It's just like, I understand like the apes are obviously like if
But
this
see,
movie doesn't, if this
it's about
movie,
empathy. That's what it is. And the perfect scene, one of my scenes for Action to Juice, is Caesar saving them from the dam after it blows. They pull him out. And then what happens? Carver has a gun, right? And then he gets mad. Caesar is pissed. He points the gun at his wife. And then Caesar turns around and just flings that thing into the river. She helps Caesar's wife. That's a whole other thing. But like Koba comes down afterwards to the dam when they're still repairing it. And he's like, Caesar loves humans more than apes, right? More than your son. And then Caesar ain't having it, right? They had the whole fight, right? And that's the first fight that they have. And that's scrap, because it is a scrap. Caesar pummels the crap out of Koba. He's like, I don't want to hear any of this. And he uses it against Caesar. He uses his own philosophy against Caesar. He's like, ape, not kill ape. And he's like, and he's bloody because, Caesar's beat the crap out of him. And Koba sees, that as being like a terrible thing, that like he doesn't see that he's brought shame. He is shameful to Caesar, that like what this stuff that he, like, Caesar is not caring for our people. He doesn't realize that these people can turn out, after we help them, they're just going to kill us. And that's what he's thinking. And it's like all the little moments, like when Koba, right after that, like Koba, how they ask for the hands? Like as like forgiveness, and then literally as soon as Caesar barely touches his hand, like Koba's hand just slips away and he just leaves. And those are the moments that count for me. That's the juice for me, where it's like you see the dynamic of these two, and it gets physical, because it's like, how much is Caesar going to take from him? And he knows how Koba is, so it's like he's going to get mad and fight him. He's not going to worry about the humans, because it's like he has that under control. And Koba, and that scene when he walks in, he pushes Alex, like Jason Clarke's character, his son, he pushes him down. And you know who gets in the way, right? Maurice.
Yeah, the most kind-hearted ape, but also could be perceived as the most intimidating as well. Like if you actually saw that ape in the wild, it'd be like, oh geez, this ape could break me in half. But I love kind of like that parallel of like having like an ape that's all about kind of like understanding and like and kindness, and just wants to like communicate like with the humans on a different level. I love that like it's literally the biggest thing possible, and
But
how you see what
it
I'm saying?
it all goes to upbringing. It goes
Mhm,
to past experiences. What I was talking about was that you see someone, let's say, I don't know, somebody on drugs, right? You don't know
mhm,
what's going on in their life, how they got to drugs, what their family situation is. There's so many things that could go wrong in a person's life for them to become addicted to drugs. And that same thing could happen to me. That same thing could happen to anybody. And
mhm,
if you don't take the time to realize what's going on, you don't take the time to realize what's going on with Dreyfus, what's going on with Koba, that they are so diametrically opposed and they're so hateful of the other group of, the other entity, which is either apes or it's humans in this case, but they are so hateful that they don't actually see what they have in common compared to what they have different. And it's like I
mhm,
said, that's the problem, that you can look at this, you can apply it to the world, that people are always going to point fingers like, oh, y'all did this wrong. Oh, you did this wrong. So now we're just going to fight for 100 years, 80 years, 1,000 years because something happened already. But somebody has to do the human thing and use the free will you have to stop that violence. And that is something of human free will that is an elevated standard. It is something that is not from the back of my brain where the most primal part is not going to be from the anger and the emotions. It's going to be regulating those emotions, understanding them, and trying to figure it out with people. And we'll talk about it in dialogues. One of my favorite lines of this movie is the last exchange that Koba, I mean, excuse me, not Koba, that Malcolm and Caesar have. Like, it's beautiful.
mhm.
But actually, there's a comparison to be made, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But let's get the production value. Production value! This movie, production value yet again. I was talking about All the President's Men today. That's a different sort of production value in the same level where it's like they're talking about one newsroom. You're bringing alive characters where I'm like, I could have never thought in my life that I think that a CG ape was real. And
Mhm,
y'all can't bring Uncanny Valley, whatever, with human motion capture stuff. But this,
mhm.
on point, perfection. And they perfected even more in War for the Planet of the Apes. You're talking about Maurice. There's a shot of Maurice in the trailer. I'm like, that's a real ape. That's a real
Mhm.
ape. You can't tell me otherwise. But that's me saying a long-winded question to you. What's production value for you for this movie?
No, to add on exactly what you said there, like when you look at these apes, you really think that's like a real ape. But I feel like what makes it just even more like just like relatable is that these apes are like we're seeing like the connections there. But like these are apes, but they're telling human stories. And
100%.
but for production value for me, I it goes back to the mocap because like this movie just doesn't work if like the mocap isn't that. That's why I don't like any of the older Planet of the Apes movies, is because I know that that's a human like with an ape costume on. Like here, it's like
It's
they're
easier to
you're
suspend the belief. Like, suspension of belief is easier here compared to that. Where it's like you
Mhm,
can get it in there. It works. Like 62, like that movie, the original, it works.
mhm,
But it's not like this. This has a different sauce. And I know, like, I think it was Martin that mentioned it, where he's like, I like the older ones better. But nah,
mhm.
I like this better.
Yeah, I like it better too, just because going back to like your whole action is the juice scene, like for production value, like the scene where that the opening sequence, like when we're learning about the apes and we're seeing, like I was about to say Koba, sorry, I was when we see Caesar become like a father, and we see like see him look at his son for the first time, just the reaction Andy Serkis gets, like I believe that.
Beautiful.
I
Yeah.
believe that, and this you could name like this podcast us Vakash and Marley just giving mocap artists like their flowers and mocap actors their flowers because no one else is doing it in Hollywood, and I just I commend them. I commend them. So yeah.
And that it really is that the apes have come alive and
Hmm.
you feel that emotion behind it. And if that emotional basis that Matt Reeves brings in isn't there, then it wouldn't work. And half of
Hmm.
that, or I'll talk about the first half, which is the mocap itself and the actors,
Hmm.
that they had to do this and had to figure it out. And it cost, guess, okay, you might not know this. For 5 seconds of apes in the movie, not like a 5-second shot, but like if you have 5 seconds and then another 5 seconds of a continuous shot, how much did it cost them to do this?
I'm really bad with like budget
For
numbers.
5 seconds, just give me a number.
It's like $1 million.
That means that this movie is like $1 billion budget. No, but the number is, he says, $50,000 to $60,000 for 5 seconds.
Oh Jesus!
So if Serkis just decides to go, that was $60,000 right there.
All worth
but
it.
But that's the thing. Like he was like, he had to figure it out. They were asking the VFX, like Weta's asking, like, how much apes are y'all gonna have? And he's like, I don't really, like, I figure out on the day what the shot's gonna be and how like don't someone was asking him to go to sets and to use stand-ins to tell like how long they might get shots, and he's like, I'm not gonna tell Gary Oldman and Andy Serkis where to stand. That's not my job. Because it's like, they know what they're doing. It's like, emotionally my character would be here. It's like, okay, cool, then let's try to start there. And it's like, that's how directors work, that's how he works. And that's one half of it, right? That he figured it out. They came in under budget on this movie, and they have great apes work in this movie. That's the production value side. The other half of the production value is Michael Sorensen. It is the fact that they took this motion capture stuff, they put it in the forest. They went into the forest in the rain, in the cold, and they actually did this. And that's what makes the big difference in this movie. And this is the first movie to do that. And he's talking about how like there's fiber optic cables. These things do not need to be in there. We're working with a 3D camera because of the studio, and these things go down. It takes time. And it's just a whole crazy thing to get the production value for this movie. And do you know who would have shot this movie if Michael? Do you know what Michael Sorensen actually shot before this? Harry Potter 3. He shot Alfonso Cuarón. But Matt Reeves just loved his work from Fame, this old movie, like from, I guess, from the 70s or 80s. He was like, oh, I can work with that guy. I loved his work when I was a kid. And he got to work with him. And that was only because Greg Fraser was busy, because he shot Let Me In with him, and they were obviously friends. But Greg Fraser, he went on to do Zero Dark 30 and Foxcatcher and all this stuff. And
the Batman.
It got to a point where after War for the Planet of the Apes, I was like, wait, hold up. It looks like Greg Fraser doesn't have something coming up. And he and Matt Reeves are friends. I'm like, oh, he's going to shoot the Batman. And I was right. And I'm so glad that he did it, because legitimately, like, this is one of the best shot, blockbuster movies of all time. The Batman is top 5 too. Fantastic work. And it's because he understands visually how to make these movies, but he also has these partners that are like fantastic cinematographers. And Michael Sorensen came to Alfonso Cuarón. I found this out recently, because Chivo, Emmanuel Lubezki, he's won 3 Oscars back to back to back. Fantastic DP, but he couldn't work on he couldn't work on Prisoners of Azkaban because he was shooting Cat in the Hat, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, he was like, oh, let's try to find some names that we like from like, oh, yeah, I know. But it's like, yeah, that's why he found Michael Sorensen, and Prisoner of Azkaban is like one of the 2 best shot Harry Potter movies. But it's so compelling to know that these guys took the time and made shots that feel lived in. The naturalistic lighting in this movie is the big difference. Like, no shade to Andrew Lesnie. He shot Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He's the guy who shot freaking Lord of the Rings. But it's like that sort of lighting and approach to cinematography compared to the natural one, especially for an ape story, it makes the difference. It makes so much of a difference.
And one more thing I'd like to add to production value as well, and the reason why I also love this movie so much is, like, being from Northern California, I'm always a huge stand for films shot around here. And I don't think they shot entirely in San Francisco. Obviously, it's like digitally like composited, like some of the San Francisco like sequences.
To New Orleans,
I like seeing just San Francisco kind of like just presented in this way. And I think Rise was actually shot a lot in San Francisco. Actually, I think they did a lot of on set, on location, like there. But just seeing like Northern California like presented in this way, I always appreciate that. And just because we see too many movies where it's like no shade, shot in Atlanta, shot in LA. It's like just because
See, that's the
they
thing
hand out
though.
tax credits. So, but
If y'all are gonna do that, then set the movies there. Edgar Wright, they told him, let's shoot Baby Driver in Atlanta. He's like, okay, well, the movie's set in Atlanta now. It's not New York anymore. That's how that works. That's how it should be. The Menu might be one of the only movies that's shot here recently where I was like, oh, this works. They use the natural components of like the sea area for Georgia that actually looks good. Origin did a good job too. Those are the only things recently that I really enjoyed from the Georgia area. So for production value, I do want to put one scene in here, and I'm just being selfish at this point, but I do want to talk about this, is that what you're talking about before is that the whole part of them actually getting the lights back on and Caesar and Malcolm shaking hands and then them getting back to the village. But you talk about Koba killing the guys, taking the guns. What does he do? What's the first thing he does? He gets the carver in the car. And the production value of that is he's lighting his match for his cigarette. Listen to the music. Oh, those SOBs, you did it. And then Koba comes out of nowhere and he gets lit by the match, like from the match, like you can see him lit. And then he just yanks him out and he doesn't even use the gun. That's the thing. He pummels him to death. And then he takes his stuff and obviously, you know, frames him up there. And the production value of them burning the village, they built a lot of that village out. And then the top stuff's like CG, but they did build that out. And the whole fire that's going on, that shot I was talking about of Koba and Blue Eyes like touching heads, and then the back is on fire. And I'm like, this is cinema. That screams production value. And like everything with the story is on high octane. Everything with the action itself is high octane with this. And then obviously they get down to San Francisco. They're at the armory, killing people, taking everything. The whole battle happens for them to get into the camp for the humans. And it is so terrifying to see it happen. And for once in the movie, the entire movie, the only time that Koba is on top is that scene right there. And you can mirror it to the scene where I forgot his name in Lion King, you know, with the hyenas when he dies,
Scar.
or when it's Scar, and then Black Panther is killed by Killmonger. Same thing, right? Same exact element happening, but this is where, like, obviously Lion King, traumatic, awesome, but this is the one that I love the most right here.
Well,
it screams production value to me.
We can have a whole nother podcast of why I think The Lion King is a little overrated and why I think Dawn of the Planet of the Apes does
a little better.
It does it way better, in my opinion, just because like like when Koba kills, like this is also production value as well. When Koba kills Caesar, like I love how Koba comes out of the shadows and gets him by surprise and gets Caesar by surprise because it's like, oh, one of my own. Oh, bro. So
you know what it says in my notes? Literally, Caesar sees Koba with the gun and shoots him. And then I say, bro, boom, what you say? It be your own people. That's literally what it says in my notes. Boom, what you say? It be your own people. And that's what it was, right?
Yeah.
And then he leaves Carver's hat in the shotgun. And I'm just like, you conniving SOB.
So, but it goes back to what you said. Like, I actually take back a little bit of what I said. How I wasn't giving him enough credit, but the way Koba sets it up, it's brilliant.
It's genius.
It's brilliant.
It's genius.
Because that's how he gets the apes on his side. He's like, how do I get these loyal apes away from Caesar? I gotta like stage it so the humans took out like our I can call Caesar a king, right? Or just a leader. But I don't know. I just love it. It's absolute genius by Koba, and I respect him for it in a way.
Caesar is a king by the end of this movie, man. You're right about that, because when he gets to the end and you just see everybody around him and they're giving him, you know, they're whatever, not bowing down to him per se, but they're giving him, you know, they're respecting him. They're doing
they're giving him his flowers.
What to call. Yeah, essentially, exactly. And it's like you see how he has become the king. He has earned being the king. And there's something about a moral, this is how you do like a moral character with actual genuine conundrums and do it properly. And it very much mirrors to Black Panther 1, where you have the scene of him and of Black Panther, of T'Challa in the dream space, or not the dream space, but the afterlife. And he's like, how could you do this to me? You could have done something. And what he's talking about is like the whole situation with Killmonger and how he handled the situation is like, how could you turn your back on your brother? And this is literally your nephew and family. And the themes run so well in that. They run so well in here. But I'm going to get into the dialogues because the dialogues in this movie are fantastic. Marley, what dialogues affected you emotionally? What's the best? What's the juice for you when it comes to the dialogues? Because this is a movie where we kind of have some things where they're not dialogue, but they are dialogue.
I already mentioned it. It's the first dialogue where Caesar just shouts "Go!" Like because that literally sets off the entire movie. Where Caesar is basically saying, "Please leave," just very 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 nicely. Please leave this land.
Go!
Because it's you feel like the compassion Caesar has for the humans because he does care about them because of his past relationships that he had with humans, but he also loves his family, his
100%.
real family, and that's just Caesar. I keep saying Koba. I keep wanting to say Koba.
Koba's
That
getting you.
yeah, but
He's
you
winning.
see he he's winning. But that's when you feel Caesar like just say like having compassion for both sides. But I also love the you brought it up earlier, just like the no guns like dialogue where Caesar basically throws like the gun
The lake.
into the lake. And this is like one of the things I love most about this movie is like when there's no violence happening like on screen and it's just dialogues just going back and forth. That's when you see like the most progress amongst like the humans and the apes. And that's beautiful because if we just like what you're saying, Vakash, if we just talk amongst each other, understand each other, that's where we see like the most progress. And I feel like this movie
Exactly.
gets that across beautifully. So
And that's the thing. The dialogue itself in this movie is something else in the sense that they used ASL essentially to have these apes talking. And there's a lot of this movie where they're talking, but it's not actually dialogue. They're using sign language. And that sort of body language, which I was talking about Terry Notary, he plays into this too, where it's like this intention behind having dialogue that's not spoken, because it's not like Maurice speaks, but you can feel the entire emotion of her, or like Maurice is a guy, but like the motion capture actress, it is an actress that does that work, and you can feel her emotions through just the way that she's moving and her facial expressions and everything. It's fantastic. And I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, one of the coolest things is that we have a whole cut of that movie where you just get to see side by side the real version and then the mocap version. You can see how close their acting is, because it is close. It is exactly what they're acting. And I've got so much dialogue for this movie. I'm not going to lie. We talked about one of the best ones for me is like human work. And where it's like very much it's Koba of trauma. He's talking about his trauma. And it's like, you see literally on me how these people have treated us. Yet you're going to help them? What are you talking about? How does this make sense? And it's like, you see the other side of that argument very much. And same sort of, vibe on the other side. Carver, the guy who brings the gun, he, one of my favorite lines is, "Oh, I'm the," and him saying that, I'm just like, I love that line. It's like, I'm the a-hole. And I say that in my life sometimes. Like, I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be adverse here, but I guess I'm the a-hole in this situation. But there's a couple more. When Caesar blames himself, I could read the whole script, but I'm not going
read the
to.
whole script.
But Caesar talks about, he's like, I chose to trust him because he is ape. I always think ape is better than human. I see now how much like them we are. apes follow Koba now. Follow Koba to war. Apes win war. Apes together strong. And it's like you see what plays out in both of those, where it's like Caesar's having his situation, and then Koba is like, "Oh, I'm on top. You ain't got to worry about a big dog. We gonna win this. It's a wrap for these humans." And it's like the whole point is that we don't want to wrap for the humans. We don't need to hurt them. Why are you trying to hurt these people? And one of the quick ones at the end was when they're fighting up top. It's like Caesar weak, Koba weaker, and I'm like, "Let's go, let's go."
One, it's like that's shade that Caesar is throwing at Cope. Just like, you may call me weak, but you are weaker. I love it. And even like the dialogue with like the humans that are going on, like Koba and Caesar are having like their fight on top of the tower. The dialogue with Jason Clarke when he approaches
Gary Oldman, Dreyfus's character,
Dreyfus, and Jason Clarke basically points the gun at him and says, "I can't let you do this." And
Dreyfus is like, "They're animals." And it's like he ends up making the ultimate sacrifice. He takes 2 people with him because he believes that he doesn't want the apes to live. And what does he do? He literally blows it up. And he's willing to take a couple people with him because he thinks that's the best good that could happen. And he's like, "Oh, it's inevitable. The other guys are coming. We've already got in contact with people from the north." And it, that deals with the next movie, whatever. But it's like this situation right here, you see both what Koba's fighting for, you see what Dreyfus is fighting for, and you see where Malcolm comes out and you see where Caesar comes out, and they both have to deal with a war that they didn't start, but they kind of have to deal with now. I do kind of expect that Malcolm died at some point between, Dawn and War, which sucks, but it probably happened. I'd hope he didn't, but it seems like he did.
I hope he didn't either, but it definitely does seem like he did. But I'm glad where his character like ended up like this at this point. Where
one of my favorite parts right before we get to the ending though is when they're ending that fight. That's that second scrap between Koba and Caesar. And Koba is on the ledge and he's hanging off and he's like, "Ape, not kill ape." He brings it back. He's like, "I'm going to use this good man's intentions and his beliefs and his morality." And then what does Caesar say? He's like, "You are not ape." Lets him drop and like the whole construction thing falls on him. And it's so movie, right? It's so cinematic. And it's like, he knows what he's done. And he's like, "I have to let him go. This man has done so much wrong that I can't save him in this situation."
It's cinematic, but especially in a rewatch, I feel like that scene kind of rubbed me a little bit of the wrong way. It made me not it kind of like lose a little bit of hope for Caesar, just because Caesar in my own mind, like I wanted that character to just walk away from the situation and let him kind of like hang on for dear life, because he knows that Koba is weaker.
It's the end of Batman Begins, where he's like, where he tells Ra's al Ghul, he's like, "I don't have to kill you, but I don't have to save you," and that's what happens.
But the fact that Caesar lets go in that moment, he's no better than Koba. And I feel like that.
You're right.
Just saying that just now, like makes like the character even better. Where it's like, is Caesar much better than Koba? Like, even though he's, I don't know.
He's human. That's what it is. He becomes human. And that's what happens right afterwards when he meets Malcolm at the steps, like at the top of the steps, and he's like, "The war started," and Caesar tells him, like, "Ape started war, and human will not forgive. You must go." He tells Malcolm, he's like, "Nah, I'm not leaving. You got to go before the fighting starts." And he says, like, "I'm sorry," and Malcolm says, like, or Caesar says to Malcolm, like, "I'm sorry, my friend. I thought we had a chance." And Malcolm's like, "I did too." And they touch heads right there in that moment. It mirrors back to Koba touching his head to Blue Eyes, where it's like, this is the actual genuine moment right here. And that works so well. And I'm like, this is what we're missing out on. And we could have had something beautiful there, but that's not real. That's not why we make movies. But we get moments like this because they're good in little moments in movies. So I love that moment.
Yeah.
And what's funny? They shot that 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks before they premiered the movie.
Oh, that's crazy.
Literally,
It's crazy
Jason
how-
Clarke is Australian, so he's in Australia. Matt Reeves is in LA editing, and then Andy Serkis is in where is he? He's in London at his studio doing the mocap. And they put that all together because they already had the shot of him ascending from the steps, and there's a different conversation that goes on, but they're like, no, it ends better here, so let's just do it here. So it's like, technically it's a hassle, but it just works in the movie, doesn't it? It's crazy. But let's get to the Layla, because there is no music in this movie. Actually, there's a song in this movie. You know that, right?
What are you
There's a needle
talking
drop. Yeah, there's a song in this movie. It's Something in the Way by Nirvana. Something. No, it's not that. But
They're
Michael
getting a copyright
Giacchino,
strike on YouTube.
Michael Giacchino did the score for this. So talk about the genius of this work.
Michael Giacchino. Whenever his name pops up on any movie, I'm in for like cinema. I know I'm in for just peak cinema at this point, because the setting and just the theme that he had for this entire movie is absolutely beautiful. I love, kind of like I mentioned it like before, how like the apes are very serene and calm, like how that score, and then when you go to the humans, it's kind of like more frantic and kind of like more on
it's
edge.
that percussion.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And it harkens back. There's a bit of an homage to the original Planet of the Apes score with that percussion element. And it's used so well in this movie, and it's used so well in War for the Planet of the Apes. Fantastic scoring work.
Yeah. But I love Michael Giacchino so much, just because it's every single movie that he like even like the like animated movie is like Soul. Like I think did he do Soul as well?
But see, that's the thing.
He understands like a scene. He understands like a scene, and
cinema.
I feel like you get that completely, like Dawn.
And he, for the 2010s, bar for bar, if you talk about, he did Star Trek, he did Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes. He did Tomorrowland, which whatever, it doesn't matter what people think about the movie itself, but the score is fantastic. He is the best blockbuster composer of the 2010s. And I'd like to hear someone say otherwise, because it's not one movie, it's all the movies he did. Even Rogue One, which I don't agree with fundamentally, I think his work is fantastic in that, which I've come around on. It sounded weird the first time I heard it, but he's awesome. But Michael Giacchino, this is the first movie we've done from him, and got to give the man his flowers, because he harkens back to this almost John Williams vibe, but it never feels like he's ripping him off in any way to me.
And when I say like when you said he understands cinema, but I said like he understands like a scene and a sequence, he understands like how his music should flow throughout a movie. And I feel like the score flows. It keeps you, like we mentioned, like there's not a lot going on like in this movie, but there's so much going on. Music is part of that, because since like when this movie starts, like with Koba's eyes, and you hear like that faint score come in,
Caesar's eyes, and there's a lot of rain, there's a thunder that comes in when the movie starts too.
Yeah, it sound effects and just score as well. You're just on this ride, and Michael Giacchino is taking you along on this journey with the apes. So,
and it's like there's a choral sound that comes through of like a person's voice whenever they set the deer onto one track, and then like the shot is kind of tracking over the deer themselves, and there's something so cinematic about that opening that always keeps me compelled. And yeah, there's silence through that movie, like through those scenes, but whenever he needs to put in the music, it works. And Steven Spielberg talks about it for John Williams, that the thing that composers do so well is to know when to have your score and when not to have your score. And yeah, there's an element of, director and other people being involved, but it is the composer being like, we don't need music here. Oh, we definitely need music here. We need to hit this beat right here. Because there's so many different ways that people make movies. They'll have music beforehand, or they'll have a vibe playing on set. There'll be something going on. There's so many different ways to do it. But when it comes to classic work, it's like you're putting music to nothing. You're creating a flow to the movie. And Giacchino is one of the best to do it. And I've got quite a few tracks from him on my scores playlist. So I am a fan. And it's like there's I think the score gets even more emotional in War for the Planet of the Apes, but this is a bit more cinematic because there's a lot more drama going on in this movie. And the other one, it's much more emotional in the sense that it's less of a mythic Western. This is more of a mythic Western, but then War for the Planet of the Apes is a revenge Western. And the emotion of that is just a different sauce, a different recipe, but it's in the same world and it works really well. For me, it works great. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the first movie I saw in Dolby Atmos was War for the Planet of the Apes, and Giacchino scoring that. When it rains, it rains. But when that score swells, it is awesome too. So, yeah, I love this guy.
Yeah, it makes you just want to just fist pump the air. So,
but that being said, I love him. I love Andy Serkis. But maybe someone else could have been in this movie. So, you know who should have been in this movie? Marley, let's recast somebody in this movie. Who did you put in this movie? Because I might have forgotten to do this category tonight.
No, I actually was on the rewatch. I used to be okay with this cast, but call me a hater, but I didn't like Jason Clarke in this movie.
Let's get off. I'm good. Good night.
I don't think he's a bad actor.
Yeah.
I feel like, especially
he doesn't have enough charisma to be a lead actor. That's what it is, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't want to say because that sounds kind of mean spirited.
No, facts are facts. I think he is fantastic as a supporting actor. I think he is a supporting actor in this movie, but it is quite a big role. So I understand if other people have a problem with it. I love him. So, I mean, who's the recast? I'd like to hear it, honestly.
Well, it's real funny because it's actually Woody Harrelson, which he's actually the main star in War for the Planet of the Apes.
He's the villain.
Yeah,
who does a lot of murdering.
But I think Woody Harrelson is so great when he comes to like compassion.
Yeah,
and I think Jason Clarke is great in Dawn, like when it comes to compassion. But I think Woody Harrelson would be even better. So
my recast for him would be Oscar Isaac, actually, because I think Oscar would have a different sauce to how he works with Caesar, but it would be compelling because Oscar Isaac, when he gets to a role like this, he kind of has an energy to him where it's like he's trying to get something done compared to the energy he has in The Force Awakens, but not so comedic, more serious. That would be the vibe, and he could do it, right?
Yeah, I would actually like to see that. I like it a lot, especially since Oscar Isaac is just he's so good with like just roles like that, and I like that Dawn was always like it's. I know we said it's a blockbuster, but it was shot pretty much like an indie film in a way, where
and that's the whole point. That's Matt Reeves' entire thesis is that y'all are doing the blockbuster stuff wrong. Like, I'm gonna find a way to do it better, and he can't just say it. He's done it 1, 2, 3 times now. So put some respect on the man's name because he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a great pick. But I also, since I kind of cheated, since Woody Harrelson is like the villain in War for the Planet of the Apes, I have 3 others that I would want to recast. I'm going to throw Pedro Pascal in there. I know he's in everything now, but like this would be in 2014. But I would kind of like to, especially after seeing The Last of Us, I would like to kind of see him like in this role where it's not totally like like the Jason Scott like character isn't totally Malcolm isn't totally like a Joel, but it's
same sort of vibe.
Same
but
vibe.
But Joel is nihilistic. That's the difference, and Malcolm is hopeful. So there's an optimism there. I don't know if you've ever looked at this cast list, but it is an interesting one.
Yes. not I know I'm coming off as a little bit as a hater too, but another character another actor I would recast. I don't necessarily care for the kid all that much. I thought he
Cody
was
Smith-McPhee,
yeah, Cody Smith.
Power of the Twink.
I can't,
That's him.
I
You know that,
can't-
right?
yeah,
That's him in Power of the Dog.
Oh really? Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I just you just threw me off with that title. So.
It's just me
But
being salty because if they wanted a better movie that's kind of the same basis, they should have just gone with Brokeback Mountain, which is a much better movie than Power of the Dog. I'm showing up my hands because I don't want to get any hate, but those are my facts. Let's get back
no,
to casting.
it totally is. But let's get back to casting. So that kind of leads into kind of going back to the Last of Us like thing. Instead of having like the Malcolm and like the Cody Smith-McPhee like
Yeah.
characters, I wanted like another father son dynamic. So I'm choosing like Henry and Sam from The Last of Us. It would be interesting to have like a deaf like having like a father and his deaf son kind of
Yeah.
like communicating with the apes on that level. It's totally changed. Like my recasting, that recasting is totally changing like the story elements there. But I don't know. I would appreciate kind of like that element where you kind of have like the son kind of like relating to like to the apes and like signing back and forth. So, but yeah.
See, my thing is that 9 times out of 10, most of the time, if it's not like a real person,
Hmm.
I'm gonna want to put a person of color, like a BIPOC individual, whether
Hmm.
man, woman, or anything else. Like I want to put them in there because that'll be more compared inherently, like
Hmm.
more compelling inherently. Because think about it, like let's say Jason Clarke, one of my favorite actors right now, Coleman Domingo. You saw Sing Sing, right?
Hmm.
Imagine him talking to the apes. Imagine him versus Caesar, what that relationship would be. There'd be a beauty to it. It'd be even more emotional. And it's like you have to have great I was telling, we were trying to recast All the President's Men, and I couldn't find an actor, like a Caucasian actor, for a younger, like a 29, 30-ish role, where I'm like, that's not like Jacob Elordi or Austin Butler, these guys who are obviously compelling actors, but they don't have that regality and that sauce to them. I
Hmm.
did end up going with Mike Face. I know you haven't listened to it yet, but he would be fantastic in All the President's Men. But this, I mean, I do like Cody Smith-McPhee as an actor, but yeah, he didn't have much to work with. Out of all the people that are there, he has some of the least amount of sauce to work with. Like the most he does really is just be the emotional kid that like
Yeah.
my mom's dead, and like I showed Maurice this thing, and I'm like drawing. I'm not really saying much, but I am present in the story.
Yeah.
Do you know one of the craziest names in this movie is actually Judy Greer? If you know who Judy Greer is, she plays
Mhm.
Caesar's wife. Doesn't say a single word this movie, but she's just apparently in this movie. It's awesome.
Well, no, she doesn't say a single word, but you know everything that she went through, especially like when she loses the love of her life, like when Koba takes Caesar away from her,
Yeah,
like in that moment, and you just see kind of just like the
the
distraught like in her
intensity.
face.
Yeah,
But yeah, I just realized I've been calling uh Jason Clarke Jason Scott for like the longest time, so
it's fine.
I'm sorry,
I think
but
it's fine.
to kind of go back to my recasting,
Jason, it's the only Jason in this movie.
yeah,
But
to go back to like my recasting, it's The Last of Us like actors are Lamar Johnson and Kevon Woodard.
Kevon's
Uh,
fantastic, man.
Yeah,
That kid, man.
Kevon would be fantastic in like a role like this to kind of take like the place of Cody Smith-McPhee. But I don't know. I just think it would be really compelling to have like a deaf actor and having that person kind of like communicate with the apes and kind of like come down like to their level. So, but
And what's interesting is that war, there are people going mute. So
mhm,
that elements it gets compelling because they did kind of explored it a little bit with Nova in the next movie.
mhm,
So nah, it's awesome. Yeah, I did actually. I mean, like I said, I don't really feel the need to recast anybody because I really do love the people in this movie, man. I think like Gary Oldman is like he's punching above the level that he needed to be. He doesn't need to be there. So it's like you're a supporting actor for your your human cast is like one of the best actors of all time, and that's awesome. And our lead is it's Andy Serkis. Like, how much better can you get than Andy Serkis? But I understand 100% with Malcolm and Alexander, like Kodi Smith-Mcfee and Jason Clarke, if y'all got to change them up. Toby Kebbel as Koba, fantastic though. He hasn't done much afterwards, but like, he is so good in this movie.
It's wild that you say that. Like, how much better can you get than Andy Serkis? Gary Oldman. It's wild that Matt Reeves would get to the, like, he's casting for this movie and he's like, we have Andy Serkis. Who do we get next? Gary Oldman. Of course.
Gary Oldman did this because he was a Planet of the Apes fan.
Mm-hmm.
That's why this happened, or else he would not have been in this movie. But that being said, I'm talking about Koba for a reason, because I need you to get up on your soapbox. Do you have a soapbox take about this movie? Get up on the soapbox. Something you got to say, bro.
I guess my hottest take, I've already said it already. I think that this is the best movie in the trilogy, and also the best Planet of the Apes movie. I know everyone loves war, but like, it's not necessarily a super hot take. It's more like a warm take.
Yeah,
in a way, just because
we have those sometimes. It's like now we say, how big is the apple box you're standing on? Your apple box is like it's got enough room for 1 foot today.
Yeah, but it's like, I know War of the Apes is supposed to be kind of like an Apocalypse Now, but I get more Apocalypse Now kind of like vibes from Dawn. Just because you see kind of,
that's
you see the tragedies of war. Yeah, you
like
see the tragedies of war.
Mentions and it's either Apocalypse Now or a different Coppola movie, but Matt Reeves definitely mentions one of those movies as being the influence for Dawn specifically, and you see it. It makes 100% sense that this is the more compelling movie. It's still compelling. It's more compelling for me here too, honestly. So, because I will rewatch War for the Planet of the Apes, and I really love that movie, but I'm pretty sure I still love this one just a little bit more because the elements of Koba and everything else in between work so much better for me.
And I feel like just War, just like, it elaborates the stuff that we already know, like that was already established in Dawn, and in a way, like, I'm not saying it's unnecessary, but it's like, I would like them to explore like other aspects of war that you didn't explore in Dawn. But yeah,
Dawn put it this way: War is Toy Story 3, and Dawn for the Planet of the Apes is Toy Story 2, where it's like, this is the finality. It's a great ending, but it's like, if you want the real sauce, Toy Story 2 had it narratively, but then if you want like an emotional sauce, then you get that more with War for the Planet of the Apes. You get what I'm saying, right?
And Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is Toy Story 4.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, well, you haven't seen it yet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm about to stand on a soapbox that's about 200 feet high, and I'm going to say this with my whole chest. Koba is one of the greatest villains of cinema ever. Period. Cut the check. Like, you talk about Hans Gruber, you talk about Thanos, you talk about Joker, you talk about the late, great, amazing James Earl Jones, who just passed away this past week. And then you add Koba to that list.
Rest in peace.
And rest in peace, James Earl Jones. But I'm going to elaborate. My thing is that you want a villain. A villain is always great when you're like, oh, he kind of has a point. They kind of have a point. She has kind of a point. And you see the work that Koba is doing. He's cultivating a group. He's not telling Caesar he saw the gums. He is messing with the humans like, oh, this stupid chimp, and he's acting like this, and it's intense what he's doing. And by the time we get to him killing Caesar, or attempting to kill Caesar, framing Carver, invading the humans, the tank scene, you see him jump over the fire, and you see the full might of Koba with him with 2 guns on a horse jumping over fire. He's literally in imminent danger, unlike anything else. And it takes it even further when he kills Ash. When he doesn't want to bash in somebody's head, a human's head, what does he do? He's like, it doesn't matter if it's an ape, if it's a human, if you don't want to listen, you're dead. And the craziest thing is that he drags him up there, right? And the camera turns, and then he just drops him off, throws him off of there. And it is horrifying. It is horrifying to see that. And we talk about the guns, and there's something to be said about the movie with the violence of weapons, but this is the violence of a soul, violence of an upbringing, a violence of a hatred that has become something in his mind, in his heart. Because what happens with anger, if you let it sit with you long enough, anger will become hatred, and hatred will transgress into action. So it's like, and that's like a life lesson where it's like, you don't want to hate people too much, or else you will, like, if you want to get angry with people, that will turn into hate. That's a very real thing for anybody who wants to deal with anger management. Don't be Koba, but you see why Koba has a point. And like I told you, he turns blue eyes against his own father, against Caesar, and he is the entire reason this war happens. And think if this was a real situation. This is one human causing all these problems. This man, okay, I don't want to use a reference that I was thinking of in my head because, this is a movie. This is not real life. But there's villains of history where you're like, oh, it kind of goes back to this, where it's like a bad guy is compelling. A bad guy is smart. They could be really good at things, and they could be brave. They could do so many things, but they do it all for the wrong reasons. And that's why they're bad. You can have a bad person that does great things, but why are they bad? Because they're doing something that's not right. There's something that's leading them astray, because no one wakes up. James Mangold, he talks about, he's like, no one wakes up and they're like, oh, I'm going to be a Batman. I'm going to be bad. I'm going to do something bad today. Yay, I'm a bad person. Nobody thinks that way. People think they're doing something good. And the logic that they have in their head, they can reason it out. And the reasoning for Koba is tragic. It's compelling. It's heartbreaking. It's horrifying. But it is cinema. It is truly what cinema is.
No, exactly. And one of the most beautiful things that you said during all of that is that
My bad.
well, no, it's I love the journey between, like, when you're watching a movie, you see the journey of a villain going from a villain to an antagonist, and I feel like you get that, like, completely with Koba. Like, Koba is like, he's like there's something not right with him. You know that something, like especially with what he went through, and you're just kind of like, why are you like this, Koba? And then you go back and, like, think about, like, Rise. I'm like, okay, yeah, but and that's why I feel like the journey from him going from villain to antagonist is justified, just because you see, like, the scars, you see, like, what the humans, you see, like, you see his full journey of, like, what the humans did to him, whether any of his actions are justified, like, that's up for the audience member to decide.
I almost want to say nature versus nurture, but it's like, compare the way that, like, James Franco's character, how did he raise Caesar versus how was Koba treated in the cages at the lab. And you see the fundamental difference, and you see the reactions being different as to how they handle situations with humans, because he has actually had and felt the love of a human being, and Koba has never felt that, and he never felt that his entire life.
And
imagine that with humans. Apply that to humans.
And
if you tell someone, and you never tell someone that they're valued, you never tell them that they're loved, how do you expect that to be a human being?
And I also, like, when I can see, like, a good antagonist or a villain, like, on screen, I always ask one question to myself.
Yeah.
And that one question is, can their problems be solved by simply going to therapy? And because, like, if you think about it, if Koba went to therapy and, like, talked through,
He'd
like,
kill
his
the
trauma,
therapist.
well, true. But I'm talking about in this weird scenario that I'm painting for Koba, like,
Yeah.
and actually he actually talked through, like, his trauma. Like, hopefully, I hope that he would be able to, like, work through it and like come to his senses. But That's a question I always ask. Like, can this antagonist go to therapy and save themselves? And that's
There's a lot of protagonists that need to go to therapy too.
what true. That's very a lot of people in general need to go to therapy. So
But that's the thing.
this
I
podcast is
very
going
much
for my
believe
better
that you
health.
got to think it out. You got to process your emotions and feel out what you're doing, and you can do that with a therapist or yourself. But you need to do it. Most people need someone else to talk it through. So it's like
Yeah.
it's interesting, and it's like if everybody had therapy, there wouldn't be movies. I'll tell you that much.
Right, exactly.
Everything would be right in this world if we actually emotionally understood our emotions, and that's what I talk about. Like this movie helped me, like the making of this movie helped me understand how these things work. Why am I feeling emotions towards an ape? Because there's an empathy within me, but it's the work that they're doing emotionally that works too, in conjunction with a willing viewer who wants to experience what's coming towards them. So
hmm
movies go both ways, and sometimes people don't understand that. Like, you know how there's a lot of us who love movies that were like a movie becomes our personality.
hmm
You will see on like TikTok or whatever, before Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes came out, there's like random guys and kids like, just acting like the apes, or like, talking with the voice and doing all that stuff. And it's because there's something transcendental about the work, about the culture cultivated specifically with this movie
hmm
and War for the Planet of the Apes from Matt Reeves that works so well for us. So I love seeing all that stuff online of people understanding and loving this movie and War, because it's awesome. This is so compelling, man. But talking about that being so compelling, the Oscars for the 2014 movies, the 2015 Oscars, are, let's say, interesting. And Marley, who's the lead actor for this movie?
Andy Serkis.
And was Eddie Redmayne, Steve Carell in Foxcatcher, Bradley Cooper in American Sniper, Benedict Cumberbatch in Imitation Game, Michael Keaton, amazing, in Birdman. Was any of that better than Caesar?
First off, what Eddie Redmayne? Was that the theory of
Bro,
everything?
yes.
Why? Like, what
But
is
answer
that
the
movie?
question. Answer the question.
The robbed. Andy Serkis was robbed. All I have to say, and
And
I mentioned it earlier, but this like I'm always upset with the Academy, but I feel like the 2015 Oscars was the one where I felt most upset, and I felt for the VFX like artists and everyone involved like with this movie, because I want people to be appreciated. I want people to be appreciated when they work this hard on a film, like you mentioned, like working up until like this film was released. And I
and
feel
for
like
them, it's kind of life or death, because
Mhm,
for some of these companies, the Oscar helps them get work.
mhm.
This was Weta, so they're kind of lucky that the goodwill of Lord of the Rings will always live with them. But
Peter
even then,
Jackson.
it's like,
Yeah.
so supporting actors. This is the year J.K. Simmons won. I'm not going to argue Toby Kebbel over J.K. Simmons, but he could have been in this
Even
category
though
with Ethan Hawke
even
for
though
Boyhood, Robert Duvall for Ed Norton for Birdman, and Mark Ruffalo for Foxcatcher. A lot of good performances, but Toby Kebbel, amazing as Koba.
even though you just said that like he's the best villain like ever in film history, and you're like, "Oh, it's okay." Like J.K.
No, but that's
Simmons
the thing. No, J.K. Simmons is actually up there. He is.
for Whiplash.
Yeah, he is.
No, okay. I know it, but I would like to see them compete. I would have liked to see them compete like in that
But I
category.
put it this way, I put him up at the same level.
Mhm,
Meaning, like, I think what JK does with that movie is career I think what both of them did actually was career defining performances, going, as a legacy.
mhm,
You can see that I don't think either one of them has done better work. I think J.K. Simmons has a lot of sauce in Counterpart. It's a show, got
mhm,
canceled, where he's playing multiple different versions of himself. But even then, the fiery cinema of Whiplash, that's still the best thing he's done. And Toby Kebbel should have been there. But that's
mhm.
if they respect blockbusters. That's if they respect motion capture work, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying to, nominate every single performance out there in a blockbuster movie, but you should recognize good performances in good movies. And if you can recognize good performances in bad biopic movies, then you can at least, have a latitude this way also. Just
Mhm.
saying.
And it goes back to like how the Academy I don't like this movie nearly as much as Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, but Avatar, Avatar: The Way of Water, like you don't see like the Academy like recognizing like that mocap. So it's
Yeah,
something I would definitely like them
and
to change in
literally,
the future.
Sigourney Weaver is playing a teenager, and I'm like, she's one of my favorite characters in that movie, actually. Like,
Mhm.
seriously. And it's crazy, man. Cinematography, Michael Cera, and he did a great job, but I'm not gonna argue it. Not today. I think he could have been there, but I'm not gonna argue it because Birdman won. I don't agree with that, but Roger Deakins, he shot Unbroken. Great work there. Mr. Turner from Dick Pope,
Mm.
and then Ida from Lucas Zal. Like, Ida is a black and white movie, Polish movie, so
Yeah.
well shot.
Mhm.
Grand Budapest Hotel, arguably Robert Yeoman's best shot movie,
Mhm.
arguably the best shot movie from Wes Anderson. So it's like he's going against giants to some
Mhm.
extent here, and the politics of all that, whatever. But he definitely could have been there.
Mhm.
But let me get to the most compelling part that you're talking about, which is, or actually, I'm not going to argue the score or anything today because the score. This is the Interstellar year. We're not going to argue that. But VFX, actually, what do you think is a better score, Grand Budapest Hotel or
I know you would kill me if I put Grand Budapest Hotel
that's
over
on you. That's
Interstellar,
on you. That's on you, big
but
dog.
but Hans Zimmer, I can't go against Hans Zimmer.
That's fine because the Grand Budapest won the Oscar, so I don't have to worry about it. I was wrong, but Interstellar is the one that plays the most still. So, and I love Interstellar, and I love that score the most of this year. But
It
it is
it's
what it
funny
is.
because I like the Interstellar score way more than the actual movie. I don't know what that says about me, but but
It's coming to theaters. Maybe rewatch it. You might love the movie for what it has to say about love.
yeah, I think that's definitely due for a rewatch for sure.
That's what I'm saying. This is one of my favorite movie years, and we talked about we did a whole episode about redoing the Oscars for this year. It's on the pod from February-ish, March. If anybody wants to go back and listen to it, like me and Zach, we have a lot of sauce about this stuff because we've been doing it for a few years and quite a few years actually. We just don't tell anybody. We just do it for ourselves, and now we just put it on the pod now. So it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But visual effects, Interstellar won. Other movies nominated: Captain America: Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, fantastic work. Stefan Soretti had a contentious conversation with that man on Twitter accidentally.
Oh,
X-Men: Days of the Future Past. No, he thought I was crapping on like the trailer for Captain America 4 came out, and you know
mhm,
the scene with the Red Hulk with the cherry blossoms is supposed to be in DC.
mhm,
I was just like, y'all could have done this in a real place. And there's a lot of stuff in that trailer where I'm like, y'all are choosing to do this a different way. And he thought I was trying to crap on them hard. And I'm just trying to I'm trying to say that what he does with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, what he did with Suicide Squad, what they're doing with Superman right now, that is
mhm,
much more compelling. And it's like there's small things of how they work, especially at Marvel, that they could change to have the movies look better. Like Captain America Winter Soldier actually looks great compared to what we saw in the trailer for Captain America 4. Just being
mhm.
honest with that. But all that to say, Dawn for the Planet of the Apes should have won this year.
It that's like almost the cherry on top when they didn't win
And
to the disappointment pie, just because it's like you didn't get nominated for any acting performances, and it's like the Academy just said like, "Good job, but we're not gonna we're not gonna give you it. We're not gonna give you anything. Here's a pat on the back." Yes.
and that's the thing. 2017. It's a very contentious argument to have, but I'm gonna have it with you. Blade Runner 2049
Hmm.
won that year. Warfare of the Planet of the Apes lost. And you could ask me on a different day and I'll be like, Blade Runner deserved it. It's fantastic. The work they did is impeccable. It doesn't feel like there's a piece of CGI in that movie, period. But the emotions of the apes, the way the apes look, the way you feel about the apes in Warfare of the Planet of the Apes, that should have won instead. And today, I'm on the apes boat. So,
Yeah, I'm definitely on the Apes boat just because I'm not really the biggest fan of 2049, but it feels like for war, it feels like for war, like when they were nominated, that could have been like their Return of the King like moment. Like they didn't get
it could
any
have been the
award.
cherry on top. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Instead, it's adding to the disappointment pie,
yeah,
as you said.
yeah, exactly. But
And that's why we like the Oscars if they coincidentally might, give respect to something that we love, but they will never be the live all or end all about the movies that we like, because it's been 10 years and the legacy of this movie is very much that we have this beautiful story, this Shakespearean Greek tragedy story about apes, about violence, about how these themes, this is science fiction, and it very much brings it all back to humans and how we work as humans. And it's compelling. What's the legacy for you for this movie? Whether it's about somebody in the movie, behind the screen, or just the movie in general.
I think the legacy, it still holds true to this day on like how we should appreciate people behind the camera, and how there's more to a performance than really just the actor. The actor's a big part of it, no doubt, but the people like coach it, like kind of like what we're talking about throughout this entire podcast. The people like coaching like these actors and teaching them the ways on how to like become an ape, or even coaching them like this is what the audience is going to be seeing. Like those people need to be respected and paid appropriately, and I know we're still getting to that point where those people need to get paid like an appropriate wages, but it's definitely a start for sure. So,
and that goes, one of my favorite things that I've heard recently is the way that they did the budgeting and the payment of everybody that worked on Sing Sing. And I'm like, if people agree to that and they want to do that sort of thing, for anybody listening, if they don't know, there was an equity partnership essentially for the producers and everybody that worked on the movie Sing Sing, dated for 2023, technically released in 2024, starring Coleman Domingo. And everyone from the actors to the directors to anyone who worked on that set got paid the same. And that's a crazy way to move forward. And I very much believe that there's a way to make a business more equitable and more easy. And not even easy, just make this a profession that people can have and not have to worry about putting food on the table or having a home or, getting, clothes for their kids or anything in between. Cause I've heard stories and it's horrifying, but it's like, yeah, there's a way forward, man.
mm-hmm.
I do want to say, do you know who Matt Reeves is tangentially related to, as in like career wise? Not tangentially, like they're very much related together. It's another director,
Christopher Reeves.
J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves met as kids because Kathy Kennedy called them up to put together the short films of Steven Spielberg that he made as a kid that were stuck in his Arizona basement of the house he used to live in. And that's how they met. And they worked on shows together and things like that. And JJ got Matt Reeves to do Cloverfield. But I think that Matt Reeves is a better director emotionally than J.J. Abrams. Even though J.J. is like, he's done so many movies, he's got a big, box office and all that sort of stuff. And I respect J.J., but I respect Matt Reeves just a little bit more.
I think I respect JJ more on the TV side, and Matt Reeves,
which I'm not discounting, not one bit. But I think, like, I always think of legacy, and I think of 10, 20 years down the line. I think I'll always come back to JJ's, the 2009 classic Star Trek, and Super 8 and things like that. I'll come back to his movies, Mission Impossible 3, but Matt Reeves, the emotions of his movies ring truer. Like, I get goosebumps thinking about Apes. I don't get goosebumps thinking about his movies. And that doesn't mean I don't love his work, because I do love a lot of his work. But Matt Reeves has the emotion, and that's what matters. That's what makes it cinema.
JJ has the spectacle, and Matt Reeves has the emotion, which can also have spectacle as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Matt Reeves has both. So he's got a little bit of an edge, but I do understand what you're saying about JJ and TV and Bad Robot. I'm a big fan. Yeah. And it's like, he's a great producer too on top of that. So it's like,
I grew up on Alias, so
that's... And Felicity, which Keri Russell was on, Matt Reeves directed a bit on that too. So the more you know. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about for legacies? I do want to bring up Andy Serkis.
Yeah, Andy Serkis. I think we're on the same page for that. And then I think I like the way he talked about all the below the line people and all the people that you don't necessarily see. Yeah, but we should talk about Andy Serkis. Yeah, Andy Serkis he needs to be respected.
He did War for the Planet of the Apes, and he shouldn't have had an Oscar. No, genuinely, dead serious. For 2017, he should have had an Oscar for Caesar. There's no doubt about that. No if, and, or but. Because it's Andy Serkis. PTA had DDL, Daniel Day-Lewis in Phantom Thread. Maybe a couple other roles in there, through that year. But one of the most emotional performances that year was Caesar. And it's like Scarlett Johansson and her. The emotion, the level of impact you have on an audience just from the work that they've done. You might not see their face, but the work that they're doing is not disingenuous or something. It's pivotal. It's irreplaceable. And to say that they didn't respect that, you talk about Gollum, everything from Gollum to now, the man has changed how you can use digital stuff to make human emotions. So this is the whole argument goes back to AI and why we hate it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, not trying to defend AI all that much. Well, actually, I don't want to mention that because it's a spoiler for Romulus. I don't want to.
Don't mention. Oh, I've heard something about some sort of scene or something. I don't even want to know. But
yeah,
talking about Andy Serkis, who is the MVP for Dawn for the Planet of the Apes? Who, like Katie says, you the MVP mom, who put the team on their back for this movie? Where if they weren't in this movie, the Enterprise would just be lesser. Who is it for you?
I'm gonna go with the GOAT, Matt Reeves. We've been propping him up this entire if the director isn't on the same page as everyone else or doesn't know how to get anyone that's working on a movie on the same page, then the movie completely falls apart. And what Matt Reeves had to do to just get everyone together and on the same page, it's mind blowing. And even what you were saying, how they were working on this movie weeks before it released. I can't even fathom what that process would be like. And the fact that he basically glued this movie together and released it and it turned out to be great, it's a miracle in my opinion.
And when he came to the movie, they already had a release date and they didn't even have a finished script. So he didn't write on this movie specifically. He did write on the Batman, but it was just a timing thing where it's like, we are under the gun. We have no choice. We have to figure this out. And it was very much that he emotionally understood what these characters are, what is compelling, what is cinematic, and he helped it make it happen. And those are the voices. They could be directors, they could be writers, it could be anything else. And it's like, my other MVP is Andy Serkis, where it's like, he's a bastion for motion capture. And if he didn't do it in the weird looking white suit that he did Gollum in, he is the proof of concept. There's, like they say in Oppenheimer, it's a real thing for life, is like, theory will only take you so far. And what they're doing with these movies, they pushed cinema further to give us a reminder that, yeah, we can make these beautiful stories about these apes and we can use technology doing it at the same time. Technology, green screen, anything else doesn't have to be a discount. It's about how you use it. And they took this brazen new technology. They created new technology because Matt Reeves was like, I want to go to the forest. I need to go to the forest. That otherwise you're not going to get the cinema you're capturing is not going to look correct. It's not going to feel real. It's not going to have this emotional basis to it. And that's just a fundamental approach of how to do these blockbuster movies. And he talks about it, how he's like, yeah, these studios, they take in a lot of directors like me. He doesn't say like me, but he's saying like me, that whether it's a Colin Trevorrow, where he did a small indie budget movie and then now he's doing a big movie. Talk about Garrett Edwards, who did Monster, which is an awesome little small monster movie, and then he did Godzilla, which is awesome too. Rogue One was a terrible, I can't even fathom having a movie taken away from me like that. He did The Creator. He's doing Jurassic Park right now, but he's able to keep his voice in there to some extent. And it's like, these guys, or they've been mostly men. Women don't even get the chance to do this. And he's like, yeah, these people kind of get chewed up by the big budget system. You look at, there's some directors who've done Marvel movies where they've been chewed up by the system. Nia DaCosta says that the Marvels is not my movie, and it's because of the system. And Matt Reeves found a way to fight back, but it also was that he got lucky because the studio, he met with them, gave them a pitch about just his general idea of like, this is the way I want to do it with the apes, and there's not going to be dialogue, and we're going to, start with the apes and do all this stuff. They didn't give him any notes. They're like, okay, that's cool, go. And it is rare that happens.
I hate to bring this up, but I feel like it has to be mentioned. But it would be very interesting to see like how this movie would have come out if Matt Reeves was a person of color, because
100%.
Matt Reeves
is fundamentally change everything.
And like would the studio actually be totally on board if like a person of color like came with these same ideas? I'm not trying to say like they
put it this way, what you're talking about, compare it to something that I had an issue with recently, Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie I enjoyed. I went to the theater, I saw it in IMAX. I didn't drink anything for 5 hours so I could sit there for 3 hours and 26 minutes and watch that good Martin Scorsese picture. But it feels like a movie from the 90s because it's not a movie of now, because it is fundamentally not from the perspective of Native Americans. It's not an indigenous story because there's not an indigenous person writing it. There's not an indigenous person directing it. There's not an indigenous person really feeling behind the camera a perspective. And I would have never made that movie that way. I would have turned it around the other way. That Lily Gladstone's character is her perspective, and she has these wolves, and it would have been a horror movie. It would have been a la freaking Malignant, because that is the horror that Leo DiCaprio and Bob De Niro, what they're doing, what they did in real life. That is how that travesty feels to me, is horrific what they did. But Martin Scorsese has this thing where he makes those horrifying things compelling, and his into that story emotionally was the love story between those two characters, between Lily Gladstone and DiCaprio's characters. But I enjoy the movie. I like the movie, but I don't understand. I don't fundamentally agree with the idea that Scorsese should have made it. All that is to say, they gave him $200 million to make that movie. Let's say Sterling Harjo, he made The Reservation Dogs. If anybody hasn't seen it, go watch it. It's on FX. Great story about these kids. And that is something where it's like, would a Sterling Harjo get $200 million to make Killers of the Flower Moon? Would that happen?
Probably not. But the thing that I've always found so compelling when it comes to POC filmmakers is that they don't need $200 million to make what they want to make, because they've been working with
nothing,
like
scraps,
with nothing for their entire life, and that to be honest, like that's what makes them like better filmmakers when it all comes down to it, because you like when it comes down to limitations make you more creative. And I know that sounds a little dark, but
I don't like the studio system. I'll go on paper saying that. Maybe one day we'll see a movie that says directed by Vikas Patel. That'll be a different day. But I don't like the studio system, and I very much believe that my morality, my beliefs dictate my life, and that if I can't live within that system and believe in what I believe in and what I see in human beings, and I can't translate that to screen, then I don't need it, because I will find a way to do it. I don't need them. They need me. And I believe that about any person of color, any person from a marginalized, a minority group that has perspectives, has culture, that has this untapped potential of character and story, that it is from their perspective. But it being inherently human makes it relatively relatable. And it's like, you watch the original Planet of the Apes movies. There's not a single person of color, and it is very weird if they put a person of color in those monkey suits, and that would have been a whole other thing. But it's like, what do Caucasian people have to do to have compelling stories? They have to think of stuff like that. And they don't want to, at that era, they don't want to confront, the very large issues of race relations and segregation, and Civil Rights Act was just passed, and they're living in that era, but their cinema doesn't reflect it, does it? And just it's a whole rabbit hole of I that all comes to me to say that I don't depend on other people to do that work. You can only depend on yourself or the communities otherwise to do it for themselves, because I don't need someone else to tell my stories. I'll tell them myself.
Preach, brother.
And I will rather see a swing and a miss from someone who is, from anybody, frankly, but as long as they're being emotionally genuine with what they're trying to do. And it's like what filmmaking is, what cinema is lying. It is untrue to some extent, but the emotions, when they ring right, they are true. And that's why we care about Apes. That's why we care about this story. That's why people will come back to this, is because they found a way to make it compelling. And it's the human element. And Caesar as a character has to realize that human element matters. So the story, man, I love the Apes. Like I'm a dream of apes tonight, apparently. But I'm a round it down to a companion movie. You got any companion movies for this one?
I could have like a whole list of companion movies. I think I've already mentioned Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now would be like a go-to for sure, especially like talking about like war is hell.
Yeah.
But as we're talking, I feel like a perfect, like we were talking about how this movie is very like anti-violence. I think like a perfect movie to even to watch with this is a movie that came out in 2022, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like a movie like at the end of Everything Everywhere All at Once, you find out like how to fight with kindness, how to like use your words and see people like on their level. Like that's exactly what Dawn is presenting. Like fighting with kindness. Don't fight with like guns or anything like that. Fight with your words, fight with compassion. Fight like stand up for the people that believe in you. Stand up for the people that
you love and
who
care
make you,
for.
who you love and care for, and make who you are. And yeah, I think it's kind of a wild pick for a companion movie, but I feel like they both deal with like the same themes for sure.
Honestly, from what I was just talking about, that's what I mean. That you want to swing for the fences, but it's so emotional. It's so in check with what it needs to say and how it says it and how that family works. And it's a wild comparison, a wild companion movie, but it's a great movie. And it is a movie where you have to practice the same amount of empathy you do for the apes, because I might cut this out, but I saw a lot of people, Caucasian people, that's the part I might have to cut out, but I saw a lot of white people say this movie's not relatable, this movie's not compelling. And every single time that happened, it was, a group of people who seemed to not have enough empathy. And it's like growing up as people of color, you, especially in a society where you're a minority, whether you're watching cinema, whether you're in your classroom, whether you're living your life, you're always alone. And you're not afforded the audacity to be ignorant. And that's why I love Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I love this movie too. That's a great companion movie.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that when you hear white people like say that this movie isn't relatable. As someone that's mixed myself, that actually comes off as white, like I want to meet some of those people, because like that is it's mind blowing to me, because like I wanted to live like their experiences in a way, because like growing up, like I might as well
You're
have
white
had.
passing. You're white passing. They made a movie about you. Rebecca Hall directed it. Fantastic movie, actually.
I still need to see that movie. But
Edward Grau, amazing black and white photography on that. He just did.
It's on Netflix.
Yeah, he just did. Yeah, who is it? Pedro Almodovar, his new movie with Swin and whoever, or with Julianne Moore. He just shot that, so you'll enjoy that. But you just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I've known you for how long, and I didn't even know you're white passing, bro. I didn't ask. I don't feel the need to ask.
But it's that's on my watch list. But it's like whenever I hear people say that, how they couldn't relate to something, honestly relate to any movie. It doesn't matter like if they're white in there or if they're POC
or if they're
like these are
Japanese talking Japanese. One of my favorite parts of Gojira -1 is that I don't have to have any basis to these characters, but the language of cinema is, it is universal, and
or it doesn't matter if they're apes too. Like
exactly.
the- these are these are relationships being built, and that's what movies are when it all comes down to it. These are people, these are apes, these are characters building and creating like relationships through dialogue. And if you can't find any relation from that, there's something wrong with you. I
I
hate saying
understand if
that, but
there's
there really is.
I understand if there's like a disconnection in the terms of like maybe there's something wrong with the filmmaking, but
Hmm.
it's like when you try to sparse art in an objective form, there's certain things I find personally that are objective in terms of like, okay, like you compare, let's say Christopher Nolan. You try to ask someone to explain Tenet to them, right? They might not be able to because there's a disconnect there, and Nolan's intention there is that you don't need to understand it. You just need to understand the vibe, and it works. But if you wanted someone to understand it, they don't understand it. So there's like a disconnect there. But Everything Ever
Hmm.
All at Once specifically, there is no disconnect. The movie is crystal clear. The narrative works perfectly, in my opinion, and they did a fantastic job with that movie. And that's not the problem there. It's sometimes, I think, my opinion, not my opinion, I think it's a fact that there's something wrong with us sometimes when you watch a good movie and you might not like it. Rewatch it,
Hmm.
you might like it again. Sometimes you got to grow, sometimes you got to think, sometimes you're just having a bad day. So
I do that all the times. I have bad days like all the time, and then like you can cut this part out, but like Rebel Ridge, like it's been like I started watching Rebel Ridge, and I'm like I'm not in the mood right now, so but I'm definitely gonna revisit it. So it's like
that's the
make
thing for
film a
me.
part of your life.
Like
So
you have to be on the vibe of it. Like I was talking to someone, her name's Maria. She talks about movies. Great individual on
Maria,
TikTok, but not Maria, a different Maria. But I'll send
okay.
you her page. But she's watching All of Us, the new Andrew Haig movie, and it's supposed to be this deeply dramatic, deeply emotional movie. And I'm like, I don't have the time to watch a sad movie right now. And she's like, yeah, it's worth watching. It's got a good catharsis to it, right? It's a good movie, but I just
Hmm.
can't handle it. So I'm not going to watch it right now. I'll watch it whenever I get to that point where I'm like, hey, let me watch something direly
Hmm.
sad. So I think that's why anybody listening, you will see the reflection of the movies that are on the pod are a reflection of my emotions very much. That if I'm talking about the movie, I inherently love it so much that it's lived in my head because these stories make me feel better. And I can say that about pretty much every single movie. Like we just did Remember the Titans, right? That movie makes me feel better. It makes me feel excited. It makes me feel there's something so compelling about that. And I think there's so many different avenues of cinema that are compelling and they can be positive and they can make you feel happy, whether they're whether whatever the situation is. Even though Koba's in this movie, I feel so excited about this movie. So, but I'll wind it down to say that we love Dawn for the Planet of the Apes. Apes together strong always. Humans together strong always. That's the ultimate
But
message. But
no, I have to ask you, what's your companion movie?
my companion movie, very much, it's just watch good sci-fi movies. I mean, obviously it is War for the Planet of the Apes, but my favorites, the ones I talk about the most, whether it's like you want sci-fi horror, watch Annihilation. If you like Minority Report, that's one of my favorites. That's a detective story. That's a different part of me. The other part of it's Blade Runner. We just covered it on the pod. That's the more soulful, introspective thing about what it means to be human. And this movie relates to that quite a bit. And these stories are all with high production value and high juice, all to come back to tell you a human emotion, a human story of what if this happened? And they pose questions to you. This movie poses the question of the anatomy of violence. What would happen? So find movies that question and challenge you. I mean, they don't always have to be, Tarkovsky, but they could be Tarkovsky. It could be Stalker. It could not be Stalker. Who knows? So just watch more movies like this. And man, I love the apes when they're good, when they're emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But Marley, it's been a fantastic time therapizing Dawn for the Planet of the Apes with you today. I will see you back on the pod for some movie. I don't know what movie, but the vibes, just as we had the vibe for Tokyo Drift, I saw that you love Dawn. That's the thing for me. I need the person to love a movie. You have a lot of love for Tokyo Drift. We talked about it plenty, but we also have a great love for the apes and the Dawn for the Planet of the Apes, and that is what's compelling to me. That emotion is inherently what I'm chasing too, which, like I said, this movie has affected me a lot. And where we're sitting here today talking about it is a landmark of where I've come in 10 years. So always onwards and upwards. There's no other way to go in life. So peace and love, Marley. It's been great having you. I'm rolling out the carpet. Where can people find you if they haven't found you already? Which I don't know why y'all wouldn't have found the man already.
Well, thank you again for having me on your podcast, Vikash. It's always a pleasure talking with you about movies.
And
you've been on.
I'm on your pod, with the Village.
Yeah, you've been on my podcast like before talking about The Village. We're doing the M. Night Shyamalan retrospective over on the Real Livers podcast. That's the podcast that I host that everyone should go subscribe to and listen to. We're also covering all the movies in the Letterboxd Top 250. We're available everywhere where you listen to podcasts. And if you don't like podcasts, you can also follow me everywhere on social media with the username @MarleyLovesFilm. Most active places there are Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. Trying to get back on TikTok, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah,
we'll have his socials in the description for anybody. So check him out. I love his work. Otherwise, we would not have been talking for I don't know how many ever hours we've talked thus far, and we will talk later. So
multiple hours.
Always exciting, brother. many hours taken, which it's awesome, man. I love it. Alrighty, peace and love. I'll see you later, y'all. Bye. Say bye, Marley.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cinema Pursuit. Cinema Pursuit is produced by Katie Nadell, Zach Nadell, and Vikas Patel. Special thanks to Cole Cooper for the intro and outro music. You can listen to Cinema Pursuit on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you may listen to podcasts. Follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram @Cinema Pursuit Podcast, Twitter or X @Cin Pursuit Pod, and check out our subreddit, r/Cinema Pursuit.